Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss some interesting signs this week that maybe the culture wars are failing and that the Conservatives would be well advised to move away from them. They won't, of course, because the swivel-eyed loons in the party won't let them. And these signs take two forms: a little movement in the polls, which may or may not be a blip, and a statement from Labour, which has moved their trans policies back in the right direction after a bit of a panic last year. So first, the polling. So I'm going to refer to the latest polls from Ipsos and YouGov here. They're the best ones. But the same trend has been seen in other polls published in the last week. Reform UK have taken a dramatic downturn in vote share since the local elections. Now, this could be explained by the fact that there's less attention on them at the moment, now that the local election campaign has ended and there are no major by-elections on the horizon yet. And indeed, all it needs is for immigration or asylum or anything like that to suddenly be in the news again. Richard Tice on the telly again, could go back up, or when the general election comes around again, they may get a bit noisier, it might go up again then. But the interesting thing here isn't that Reform UK's share of the vote has dropped significantly. It's that Reform UK's share of the vote has dropped significantly, and the Conservatives has only bounced a little. Nowhere near to the extent that Reform UK's has dropped. Now, there is a commonly held misconception, particularly within the Conservative Party, that Reform UK voters are basically their disaffected voters, so that they're interchangeable with the Conservative Party. That all of the Reform UK voters, if Reform UK, say, stood down, they would vote Conservative. Now, this second part, this isn't true. Polling suggests this is true. This isn't true. Analysts have been saying for some time, no, there are quite a lot of Reform UK voters who may have voted Conservative in the past, absolutely yes, but they're not going to for this election no matter what. If you don't give them a Reform UK candidate, they just won't vote at all, or they'll vote for someone else. They'll vote for maybe an independent. It's why I say that even if Reform UK did stand down, yes, that would save the Conservatives some seats. The fact that Reform UK are likely to stand means they are going to cost the Conservatives some seats. It's not as many as Tory MPs think. If Reform UK stand down, actually, they'll make it even worse for the Tories if they did a deal. But if they stand down for whatever reason, the Tories are not going to save as many seats as they think. And this latest polling shows that. If the votes were basically interchangeable, then Reform UK lose 4 points. That should give the Conservatives 4 points, or at least 3. In the latest Ipsos poll, Reform UK have dropped 4 points compared with last month, but the Conservatives only gained 1 point. Reform UK have also dropped 4 points with YouGov since the start of the month, with the Conservatives gaining 2. So in both cases, well short, the Conservatives gained less than Reform UK lost. So where did the other Reform UK voters go? Well, first of all, just to head off one idea that people have commented on previous videos where I've discussed this, it's in this case, it won't be a sampling issue. The reason polls can wobble over time, that is to do with sampling. So, if it goes up by a point or down by a point, it doesn't mean that party has lost or gained popularity by a point. That can just be because although the sample targets the same sort of voters in the same proportions, it's not physically the same voters. But there are two reasons why we shouldn't think that here. First of all, the size of the change is significant. 4 points is quite significant. This is YouGov and Ipsos here, not Delta poll. Secondly, several pollsters are all showing the same trend of Reform UK falling away significantly this month, and the Conservatives not gaining anywhere near the same numbers. So if it were a sampling issue, you might get, you'd see differences with different pollsters, but they're all showing the same trend. Now, as I say, it can be a blip. The next time the Rwanda plan comes up in the news, or just immigration figures are released, which I think is quite soon, might even be this week, or the next time there's a notable election, which will now probably be the general election, Reform UK may get more attention in the media, may come back again. But the point is that at the moment, this total share, or if you add up Conservative and Reform UK vote share, that combined share has gone down in the last few weeks. I don't think it moved to the Greens or Lib Dems. It's probably that these people have either decided they're going to vote for a different candidate, an independent candidate, or that they're now saying they're not sure who they're going to vote for, or that they're sick of all the options and aren't going to vote for anyone, which could be a sign that the culture wars are failing, either because more voters have decided there are more important issues and they're not interested in a party that's only pushing culture wars, or because they've decided that neither of the culture war parties really have the solutions. But on its own, a 2-week poll trend isn't enough to get excited about. I wouldn't have mentioned it, but for something else that happened this week. So the polling I've talked about is the polling we get to see published, but it's very general. It doesn't answer very specific questions. Political parties, however, can commission polling which does answer very specific questions of very specific voters. And Labour, of course, have been very good with their polling. And they announced recently that they're considering a proposal to make changing your gender simpler. It will still require a GP to be involved, but not the panel of doctors and lawyers that currently exist. And all this would have seemed fine in 2022. You go, yeah, this is what Labour have been thinking about anyway. But Labour had a bit of a wobble last year. It began with the gender recognition bill in Scotland. Despite having cross-party support in Holyrood, including from some Conservative MSPs, it ran into significant controversy. The Tories in Westminster eventually had it struck down as not being a devolved matter for the Scottish Parliament. But while that process was taking place, a major row blew up over a trans woman. The woman had been identifying as a man, or at the time the woman had been identifying as a man, had raped 2 women and was sent to a woman's prison since changing gender for sentencing. Not to serve the sentence, but for sentencing. Sturgeon, who was First Minister at the time, tried to make this point. She said, look, no trans women with a history of violence against women will serve their time in a women's prison, and that the transfer was just while they were waiting sentence. But it created a huge scandal. It gave the anti-trans lobby a huge amount of ammunition. It was a massive cock-up on the part of the Scottish government here. It completely soured the political situation. Cut away a great deal of the support that the SNP had for this bill. And Labour panicked as well. You know, they were even making public apologies to Rosie Duffield, who has continued to behave like a complete knobhead. But never mind. I don't know why they bothered. But it wasn't just the scandal. Labour were also being asked continuously about trans issues in interviews. Now, think about it this way. Labour go into an interview. They've only got limited opportunities to talk directly to the public. They can write the odd article in a newspaper. Only so many people read the newspapers. Television interviews is where it is. They want to talk about what the public want to hear about. Cost of living crisis, the economy in general, the NHS, particularly waiting lists, housing, net zero. Those are the issues Labour want to talk about. Transport issues, things like that. What they were being asked about is, oh, what's a woman then? So they were getting a bit tired of it. And I think they just thought to themselves, right, let's just, and they've done this with other issues as well, we're going to take the sting out of it. Because they were absolutely sick of being asked questions that 1% of voters think is a top issue. That's not helpful to them. So partly as a result of that, and partly as a result of panicking over the situation in Scotland, I think, Labour decided to do what they've done with so many pointless wedge issues with the Tories. They took that sting out, which manifested itself in Labour's case by just focusing on biological sex, not bothering to point out, social gender in discussions, in order to just stop the questions. But this week, by announcing moves to humanise things a bit more for trans people, Labour have shifted the dial a bit the other way. Now, Labour aren't going to suddenly change an approach just because 2 weeks of polling said something which might indicate that the culture wars are not working for the Tories. They have their own polling, like I said. The polling they commission, very focused on specific issues and on a very specific type of voter. What is that voter? The swing voters in the constituencies that Labour are targeting. Those are the important voters. Whereas the polls we see published are very general, either in terms of the topics or the people polled or both. Labour tailor theirs to their own needs. By announcing this new proposal, because they didn't have to rush to this. This was not a knee-jerk proposal. It's not like something suddenly happened in the news and they had to come out with a position. They've had a lot of time to think about this. They will have tested not only the policy, but also the wording of the policy proposal. in focus groups on those target voters. Everything Labour announced that they don't have to announce will have gone through focus groups and other polling. So Labour have made this announcement. It's basically inviting journalists to start asking about trans issues again and deny them the chance to talk about the economy, the NHS, housing or net zero, which is what they want to focus on. That could be a sign that Labour feel that either the mainstream media won't be bothered to keep ramping up trans issues at this point, or if they do, that their own message is now cutting through to the public. And so it doesn't matter so much. Certainly it would appear that something has calmed Labour down on the issue since last year. I could also add that Keir Starmer had a private meeting with Rosie Duffield recently, apparently to clear the air. And I got the impression that Duffield was not satisfied with what he had to say, which is also probably a good sign as well that the panic in Labour is dying down. A sign that Labour don't think the Tories are presenting much of a threat with at least certain culture wars. And if that is the case and it continues, that's going to be pretty bad news for Rishi Sunak. Because when he has to launch his own party's general election campaign, what platform is he going to have available on which to fight it? But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.